My brother and my wife thought I was too boring to notice their affair, or their plan to steal my company. But I didn't just notice. I documented everything. And when the time was right, I made one move. That ended their entire game. The softly lit dining room of one of Langford Bay's most exclusive restaurants exuded quiet elegance. Harlan Voss sat with practiced stillness, a leather-bound wine list resting in his hands. Across the table, Celeste Breyer, his wife of 2 decades, barely lifted her gaze from beneath the linen-draped table. Her phone screen glowed faintly, illuminating the contours of her polished cheekbones and casting shadows beneath her eyes, aged not by time but by disinterest. Harlan set the wine list down with deliberate precision. The crystal chandelier above caught the edge of her wedding ring, sending a cold glint across the table. She did not look up. He watched her fingers flutter across her phone. Familiar motions now, no longer concealed behind pretense. He glanced once at the window beside them. The skyline of Darsenport shimmered in the distance, a city they once dreamed of conquering together. Now, it merely reflected back the illusion of a life they no longer shared. This evening had been Celeste's suggestion, an anniversary gesture that arrived too easily, too rehearsed. 20 years earlier, they had met under vastly different circumstances, ambitious students brimming with ideas. Harlan remembered the taste of that first shared glass of red. He had intended to order a 1998 Merlot to mirror that night. Instead, she had already ordered something before he could speak. The server approached with reverent posture. "Would you prefer the Callenridge estate or the 2001 Barlow Reserve, Mr. Voss?" "The Barlow. And kindly extend my thanks to the chef for accommodating us on a closed evening." A flicker of emotion passed across Celeste's face, so brief he might have missed it. Surprise or something closer to guilt. It vanished behind a practiced smile as she raised her glass. "To 20 years," she said, voice too light. Harlan's lips twitched, though it didn't reach his eyes. He echoed the gesture, and they drank. Her glass shook ever so slightly against his. Conversation came in fits, mostly driven by him. Her responses were clipped, vague, her attention returning again and again to the glowing rectangle in her hand. Wagyu beef cooled, untouched on her plate. Harlan ate slowly, methodically, each bite a measure of control. He had built Voss Biotech from a dusty garage to a multibillion-dollar leader in medical systems through this very skill precision. The signs had been there. The late nights she claimed were strategy meetings, the curated wardrobe, the unexpected enthusiasm for squash. A sport she had once mocked, but one that Lucian Strathmore played religiously. His brother, once a partner in both business and life, recently absent from family dinners, executive meetings, and their long-standing squash rivalry. On the drive home through quiet tree-lined streets, Celeste's posture grew tense. The silence between them was thick, weighted by all the things unspoken. As they entered the circular driveway of their estate, she shifted in her seat. "I need to return to the office," she said. "There's a last-minute comms briefing with the European division. The timing coincides with overseas market hours," Harlan finished for her. She didn't respond. Instead, she stepped out, heels clicking across the stone pavers, sliding into her car without so much as a backward glance. Her taillights disappeared into the mist that hung low over the hedgerows. Inside his study, Harlan moved with quiet purpose. The house was cavernous without Quentin, away at a private academy in Rivorton. Harlan had once hesitated to send him, preferring a more grounded life. But in this moment, he was grateful his son wouldn't witness what was unfolding. At his desk, he opened an application hidden behind layers of security. Installed weeks prior, it had been a reluctant move. But suspicion had long since given way to certainty. A blinking signal on the map confirmed Celeste's car had turned not toward the Voss Biotech Tower, but to Lucian's penthouse in the city center. Another monitor glowed with camera feeds from their headquarters. Harlan switched screens until he found what he was looking for. Communications metadata, internal access logs, financial authorizations. All routine in appearance, but there were patterns, logins at odd hours, rerouted approvals, shared credentials. By midnight, the audio feed confirmed everything. Celeste's voice filtered in, hushed but unmistakable. Once the new interface launches, we're free. He's too focused on code to see what's right in front of him. Harlan did not flinch. His hands, steady from years of precision work, simply recorded the file and saved it to an encrypted drive. Another screen displayed transactions tied to shell companies, entities recently linked to Lucian. The picture sharpened. Betrayal, both personal and professional. And yet, Harlan did not feel rage. Only clarity. He opened a private log, one even his legal team didn't know about. There, he began documenting everything. Timestamps, anomalies, messages, video clips. He compiled a picture not of vengeance, but of undeniable fact. The dinner may have been intended as a farewell, an indulgent nod to a marriage already lost. But Harlan had always known that silence held more power than accusation. By morning, the first chess move had already been made. And unlike his brother, Harlan didn't play to impress. He played to win. The following morning arrived quietly, the kind of pale, overcast dawn that dimmed even the manicured brilliance of Halden Park Estates. Harlan Voss sat at the long mahogany dining table alone, a half-eaten piece of toast growing cold beside a perfectly steeped cup of black tea. Across from him, an empty chair echoed everything he already knew. Celeste hadn't returned, nor had she sent a message. He took his time finishing breakfast, his motions unhurried. Years in executive strategy had taught him the power of composure. Panic was for those who hadn't planned. By mid-morning, Harlan was in his private office, the screens around him humming softly. He rotated between feeds, security footage, financial overviews, internal correspondence archives. Each window confirmed what his instincts had already laid bare. Lucian Strathmore had been using his executive credentials to override standard development protocols for the Neural Interface Technology project. The changes were subtle enough to be missed by a distracted audit, but Harlan was not distracted. Pattern emerged. Documents routed through unfamiliar IP addresses. Commit logs updated at hours Lucian was supposedly out of the country. The company's proprietary software was being siphoned, slowly, deliberately, and masked behind layers of redirection. And Celeste had cleared each move through the PR division under the guise of international branding strategy. Harlan leaned back in his chair, the fingers of one hand resting against his lips. He allowed himself a moment, not of disbelief but of confirmation. They weren't sloppy. They were simply arrogant. The same arrogance had led Celeste to slip into the house just after dawn, assuming he'd be asleep. Her perfume still clung to the hallway as she made her way to her side of the house. They hadn't spoken. She hadn't tried. By noon, Harlan's assistant, Ivy Kessler, entered his office without her usual morning pleasantries. She'd been with him for over 15 years. Her ability to read a room was unmatched. "There's movement on the investor portal," she said quietly, placing a folder beside him. Celeste approved a press draft about the interface product launch. It includes projected leadership transitions. He opened the folder. There it was in black and white, language suggesting a change in executive structure, aligned with the future vision. No names were listed, but the implication was clear. Harlan gave a slight nod. "Pull all PR department memos from the past 60 days. Send them directly to legal. And Ivy," she paused at the door, "start compiling a timeline. Focus on overlap between Lucian's travel records and any code check-ins or strategic meetings." Her eyes narrowed slightly. Understood. Once alone again, Harlan accessed his secure server. He uploaded the latest evidence, screenshots, audio snippets, modified logs, and encrypted them under the file tag, Foresight Protocol. The rest of the day unfolded with the stillness of a storm building. On the surface, operations continued as normal. Development teams worked. Meetings were held. Memos were sent. But Harlan could see the tension everywhere. The forced smiles, the quiet glances, the slight changes in posture when he entered a room. In the executive boardroom, a meeting was underway without him. Lucian, seated at the head of the table, addressed several department leads. Celeste stood at his side, projecting authority she had not yet earned. Through the security feed, Harlan watched them present an overly polished pitch about next-gen implementation timelines and global partnerships. He listened without emotion. Their plan was bold, dangerously so, and their belief that he wouldn't notice, wouldn't act, revealed the very weakness he would soon exploit. That evening, as dusk settled over the estate, Harlan sat alone in the library. The room smelled of old wood and leather bindings. On his lap rested a thick binder, one of many now assembled with meticulous care. Inside, timelines, correspondence, voice logs, redacted bank transfers. He wasn't building a case for revenge. He was constructing certainty. At exactly 9 p.m., he placed a call to Ramona Finch, lead counsel at Claywell Hart. He didn't explain everything, only enough. Prepare to enact Clause 17C in the Executive Charter. I'll need you present at the shareholders' audit meeting. The timing is fluid, but close. There was a pause on the line. Then Ramona responded, her voice sharp with understanding. Understood. I'll begin pre-clearance. When the call ended, Harlan remained seated for a long moment. Beyond the window, the estate's gardens rustled in the breeze. Somewhere out there, Celeste walked the paths she used to adore. Lucian, no doubt, was basking in a sense of invisible victory. But the board hadn't seen what Harlan had compiled. The developers hadn't been told that Lucian's code access was now mirrored, and Celeste hadn't yet realized that Ivy had rerouted her outbox. Harlan closed the binder and stood, returning it to the safe behind the painting that had once been a wedding gift. The real game hadn't started yet, but the pieces were placed and the board was his. He only needed to wait for the moment to strike, and when he did, there would be no recovery for those who thought the quiet brother wasn't watching. The morning of the board's quarterly review began like any other. Polished glass, tailored suits, and coffee served in bone-white porcelain. But beneath the veneer of professionalism, a quiet reckoning had begun to take shape. Harlan Voss stood in his corner office, the skyline of Darsenport behind him, while 3 monitors displayed data feeds that told a different story than the one projected in the company's press releases. He had waited long enough. Lucian Strathmore's name now appeared on more than internal memos. Industry analysts speculated on leadership changes within Voss Biotech. Whispers in trade publications hinted at instability. All of it seeded by careful manipulation from within, messages greenlit by Celeste Breyer's PR division. Time to coincide with Harlan's strategic silence. But silence had never meant inaction. At 10 a.m., Ivy Kessler stepped into Harlan's office, tablet in hand. Ramona Finch is waiting in the executive conference suite. Legal reviewed the compiled evidence, ready for presentation. The board has been seated. Harlan turned away from the window and nodded. His suit, charcoal with a crisp blue tie, was as exacting as the documentation now encoded across 3 secured drives. Ivy handed him a small case. Inside it, a remote drive, clean, preloaded with only the relevant files. He took it without a word. In the hallway, employees straightened as he passed. Some offered polite nods, others looked away. The narrative had already shifted. Celeste had whispered of burnout, hinted at obsessive tendencies, painted a portrait of a man drifting from relevance. Harlan knew the image well. It had been planted like a virus. But today he would remove it at the root. The boardroom was a temple of minimalism, glass, steel, light. 8 members sat around the oval table, each one a veteran of finance, biotech, or corporate law. At the far end, Lucian reclined in a leather chair, expression unreadable. Celeste sat beside him, her posture confident but too still, like someone bracing for turbulence. "Thank you all for attending on short notice," Harlan began, connecting the drive to the room's secure display port. "I've come to present findings related to Voss Biotech's current product cycle, specifically the Neural Interface Project, and associated executive activity." The screen flickered to life. First came the audit logs. Development access under Lucian's credentials at impossible hours. Locations that contradicted travel records. Then emails, Celeste's messages to press contacts suggesting leadership shifts, some of which had already gone to print. followed by internal memos she had signed off with Lucian's edits in metadata. Finally, the encrypted video logs. Security footage showed the two entering restricted labs after hours. Harlan played only brief clips, enough to establish fact without spectacle. Across the table, the reaction was slow but visible. Glances were exchanged. Pens stilled. Declan Hart, one of the longest-serving members, leaned forward, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "What's your objective, Mr. Voss?" he asked evenly. "Clarity," Harlan replied. "And containment." The next file he opened displayed a side-by-side comparison of the real neural interface code, securely housed and untouched, and the decoy system Lucian had been siphoning. It had been designed weeks ago under Ivy's supervision, indistinguishable on the surface but embedded with markers to track unauthorized replication. "I anticipated this breach," Harlan said calmly. "The real system remains protected." A low murmur passed around the table. Mira Halden, another senior board member, lifted her gaze from the file in front of her. "And what would you have us do?" "Delay the public launch," Harlan answered. "Issue a formal internal audit. All executive credentials are to be locked for 72 hours. In that time, legal and compliance will complete their investigation. And I request a vote of no confidence for Mr. Strathmore." Lucian's composure finally cracked. "This is absurd. You're basing this on conjecture, on carefully edited logs." Ramona Finch, seated quietly near the door, spoke for the first time. "We've confirmed their authenticity, and we've already contacted the SEC regarding irregular transactions linked to shell firms in Eastport." Celeste's mouth parted slightly, but she said nothing. For the first time in months, she looked unsure. Declan tapped the table twice. "Let's vote." The result was unanimous. Lucian rose, knocking his chair back slightly. He didn't speak. Security was already waiting just outside. As he left, Celeste remained seated, her eyes not meeting Harlan's. He watched her for a long moment before addressing the room once more. "The launch will proceed, in time, on our terms, with integrity." He collected the drive and left the room in silence. Outside, employees paused to watch him pass. This time, no one looked away. In the elevator, Ivy waited. "It's done," he said simply. She nodded. "Monique Celeste has called 3 press contacts already. Shall I redirect them?"
"No," Harlan replied.
"Let her speak. The truth's already louder." Back in his office, the screens blinked with alerts. But for the first time in weeks, the noise was predictable, measurable, controlled. The trap had been set. The doors had closed. And now, the reckoning would unfold exactly as he intended. Quietly, precisely, and without room for escape. The day after the boardroom reckoning, the executive offices of Voss Biotech were a study in manufactured comm. Lucian Strathmore's name had been scrubbed from the building directory. His access credentials revoked. Yet the air buzzed with nervous energy as employees whispered in hallways and avoided eye contact with Celeste Breyer when she passed. Harlan Voss moved through it all with measured stillness. He had not spoken directly to Celeste since the vote. He hadn't needed to. The evidence had spoken for him, and the silence that followed was far more powerful than confrontation. Publicly, a formal audit had been announced, framed as a proactive measure to reinforce data security protocols. Privately, every digital transaction involving Celeste and Lucian was being dissected by legal. In her corner office, Celeste paced. The press calls she had placed went unanswered. The journalists who once printed her leaks without question had all received anonymous packets. Packets containing timelines, screenshots, and footage. Her story no longer fit the narrative. At home, she found her accounts frozen. Her personal assistant gone. Even her luxury vehicle had been towed, its lease tied to executive perks she no longer held. Her calls to Lucian went straight to voicemail. He had disappeared before the ink dried on the board's ruling. Last seen leaving the Darsenport Tower with 2 suitcases and a passport flagged in 3 countries. Meanwhile, Harlan quietly assembled his final pieces. He returned to the family estate in Halden Park that evening. There, in the sitting room where so many family decisions had once been made, he met with Everett Kane and Lucia Wren, his aging parents, and his sister, Talia Noor. Seated beside them, Quentin Voss looked older than his 17 years, his eyes tired. They had been part of it, knowingly or not. Lending money to Lucian, covering for Celeste's absences, even indulging Quentin's growing admiration for his charismatic uncle. The betrayal stung deeper because it had worn the mask of loyalty. Harlan didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply showed them. He projected Lucian's voice, recorded months ago, as he joked about manipulating the family, convincing them that Harlan had become erratic and irrelevant. Then came Celeste's laugh, her voice cooing about her plans to shape the company's image with Lucian at her side. Quentin was the first to speak, his voice strained. I believed them, about you, that you didn't care anymore. You believed what they needed you to believe, Harlan replied. But it's time to see what's true. There were tears from Lucia, silence from Everett, and a choked apology from Talia. But Harlan didn't seek retribution. He sought clarity. It was enough. The following morning, Ramona Finch delivered the final divorce paperwork. Celeste's legal team had gone silent, stunned by the volume and precision of the compiled evidence. Clauses in the prenuptial agreement, once mocked as paranoid, now ensured she would leave with nothing more than what she had arrived with. She signed in silence. That same week, Ivy Kessler oversaw a quiet transition. Key project leads were reassigned. Developer access was refreshed. Investor confidence, bolstered by the board's swift action, stabilized. Voss Biotech stock not only recovered, it climbed. By Friday, federal investigators entered the building. Lucian's offshore accounts were already under review, and charges of corporate espionage and wire fraud were being formalized. His attempt to sell proprietary software to competitors had been traced through layered proxies, until it wasn't. Celeste, once the architect of the company's public image, now found herself escorted from the building with no press to spin her fall. Back in his office, Harlan stood at the window as dusk settled over Darsenport. Behind him, monitors displayed cascading lines of code, real code, untouched by sabotage. At his desk lay a photo, face down, a younger version of himself beside Celeste at their wedding. He did not shred it. He did not burn it. He simply left it there, turned away, no longer part of the future but no longer dictating the past. As the city lights flickered on, Harlan knew this chapter was closing. There would be trials, public hearings, scandals. But the storm had been weathered. The betrayal that was meant to ruin him had only clarified his purpose. And those who once underestimated him now knew. Quiet does not mean weak. Sometimes it means ready. 5 years passed. The world moved on, but the name Voss remained etched into the skyline of Darsenport, its 3 gleaming towers reflecting both technological progress and the quiet resilience of the man who rebuilt them. Inside the new Voss Neural Innovation Center, research teams in pristine white coats worked on breakthrough technologies, mapping neural pathways, restoring mobility, transforming lives. At the top floor, in a spacious but modest office, Harlan Voss stood at the edge of the window. His hair had gone fully silver, and fine lines marked his face, but his posture was still the same, measured, upright, watchful. Behind him, a framed award rested on a shelf, the International Medal for Medical Advancement. His work on the secure interface had revolutionized neural feedback systems across multiple fields. Outside the door, Quentin Voss discussed clinical trials with Ivy Kessler, now CEO. The boy who once idolized his uncle had grown into a sharp, quiet leader in his own right. After medical school, he returned to lead the company's biomedical research division, not out of obligation but clarity. He understood now. He had learned the value of patience and precision from the one person who had never needed to prove himself through noise. Lucian Strathmore's name had long disappeared from public memory. After fleeing to East Asia, he spent years dodging extradition until one quiet day in Bangkok, authorities found him dead in a low-cost hotel. Overdose, they suspected. The world didn't mourn him. He became a footnote in articles about corporate betrayal, a cautionary tale of wasted opportunity. Celeste Breyer had resurfaced in Paris after vanishing for 3 years. With her French citizenship, she evaded criminal prosecution, but not the consequences of her choices. Her attempts to re-enter the corporate world were met with closed doors. She spent her days giving tours in the outskirts of the city, her name remembered only in whispered speculation. Her emails to Quentin, sent every month without reply, became her only remaining link to a past she could no longer shape. Back in Darsenport, the company thrived. The neural interface technology, once nearly stolen, now formed the backbone of thousands of hospitals around the world. Voss Biotech became synonymous with ethical innovation, discreet, effective, trusted. On the day of Harlan's formal retirement from the board, the auditorium was filled, not with press or politicians, but with scientists, engineers, patients whose lives had been transformed. The applause was warm, not thunderous, a reflection of the man they had come to respect. Quentin spoke at the ceremony. His voice was steady, his words few. He didn't romanticize his father's journey. He simply told the truth. My father never sought the spotlight. He didn't need to win the loudest argument. He just needed to be right. And he was. Afterward, Harlan returned to his study at the family estate. The portrait of Everett Kane and Lucia Wren hung in the hallway now, a nod to the legacy they had started. One nearly lost, but saved through vigilance. On his desk, he kept a single photo. Not the wedding image that once haunted him, but a still frame from a clinical trial. A paraplegic child taking his first steps thanks to the interface. No frame, no plaque. Just the image quietly reminding him what it had all been for. One last letter arrived that spring, from Celeste. It was short, almost bare. She wrote that she was sick now, alone. She asked for nothing but forgiveness. Harlan didn't respond. He didn't shred the letter either. He simply filed it away, another piece of the past, documented and archived. In his final journal entry, written by hand in a leather notebook, he penned just one line. They mistook silence for weakness. They mistook detail for delay. They mistook me for someone who wouldn't finish the game. When Harlan Voss passed away quietly at the age of 83, tributes came from research institutions, medical journals, even heads of state. But the company he left behind required no tribute. It stood as its own proof. No scandals, no chaos, just structure, innovation, and quiet strength. Because in the end, the ones who plan in silence leave behind the loudest legacy.